lost track of what day it is. The casino floor was bright and loud 24 hours a day. The employee areas were the opposite. Behind the walls, away from the gaming floor, everything was quiet. Long hallways, concrete floors, storage rooms, employee bathrooms, security offices. After a while, you learn every shortcut in the building. That's what makes this story so unsettling. It happened in a place I knew extremely well. The first time I saw him, I didn't think much of it. I was walking toward the employee restroom around 1 in the morning. The hallway leading there wasn't accessible to the public. There was a badge-controlled door separating it from the casino floor, and employees used it constantly. As I turned the corner, I noticed a man standing near the vending machines. He looked to be in his 40s. Jeans, dark jacket, baseball cap. Nothing unusual. I assumed he worked there. Maybe maintenance, maybe a vendor. I nodded and walked past him. He didn't respond. He just stared. I remember thinking that was a little rude, but that was it. The next night I saw him again. Same hallway, same spot, just standing there. This time I noticed he didn't have a badge clipped anywhere. Everyone who worked in those areas had a badge. Everyone. I looked for one automatically because I was trying to figure out whether I recognized him. I didn't. He stared again. No smile. No greeting. Nothing. I went into the restroom and didn't think much more about it. When I came out, he was gone. A few days later I saw him again. Then again. Then again. After about 2 weeks, I realized something strange. I had never once seen him actually doing anything. Not cleaning, not stocking, not repairing, not carrying equipment, nothing. He was always just standing there. The location changed slightly from night to night, but it was always around the employee hallway near the bathrooms and break room. One night I mentioned him to another waitress named Erica. "Do you know the guy with the baseball cap?" She looked at me and said, "What guy?" I said, "The one always hanging around the employee hallway." She immediately knew who I meant. "The creepy dude?" That got my attention. "You've seen him too." She nodded and said, "Yeah." I asked, "What does he do?" She shrugged. "I have no idea." Apparently several employees had noticed him. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew what department he worked for. Nobody even knew his name. The weird part was that nobody had ever reported him, because everyone assumed somebody else knew him. Casinos employ hundreds of people. You don't know everyone. A few nights later, I was walking back from the employee cafeteria when I saw him again. This time he was closer. A lot closer. He was standing near a doorway that I needed to pass through. As I approached, he smiled. It was the first expression I'd ever seen from him. "Long night?" he asked. I remember stopping not because of the question, but because his voice surprised me. He spoke like someone trying very hard to sound friendly, almost rehearsed. "Always," I said. He nodded. "You work weekends too?" That question felt strange, maybe because it wasn't normal small talk. Maybe because he asked it immediately. I shrugged and said, "Sometimes." Then he asked, "What time do you usually get off?" Every alarm bell in my head went off. I laughed awkwardly and kept walking. "Depends," I said. He watched me leave. I could feel it. That was the first time I genuinely felt uncomfortable. The next week, things got worse. I started noticing him looking at me on the casino floor. Not just in employee areas. On the floor, near slot machines, near the sportsbook, near one of the bars. Every time I looked up, he seemed to be somewhere nearby. Not talking, not gambling, just watching. One night I pointed him out to a security guard I knew. His name was Marcus. I asked if he knew who the guy was. Marcus looked over and said, "Never seen him." I said, "Really?" He shook his head. "No." I asked if he could check, and Marcus said he'd keep an eye on him. About 20 minutes later, Marcus found me again and told me the guy was gone, just disappeared. The casino had hundreds of exits, so that wasn't difficult, but still, it bothered me. The following weekend, something happened that made me stop dismissing my instincts. Around 2 in the morning, I went into the employee restroom. When I came out, he was waiting outside, not standing near the vending machines, not down the hallway, right outside the door, close enough that I almost ran into him. I actually jumped. "Sorry," he said. Then he smiled. I didn't mean to scare you. I didn't respond. I walked around him. He started walking beside me, not aggressively, just matching my pace. You work here a long time? I ignored him. You live nearby? Still ignored him. Then he asked, Do you have a boyfriend? That was enough. I stopped walking and looked directly at him. What department do you work in? The smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Why? He asked. I said, Because I've seen you back here for weeks. He stared at me. Then he simply turned around and walked away. No answer. Nothing. I reported it to security that same night. Marcus took it seriously. A report was written. Security reviewed cameras. The problem was, they couldn't identify him. The footage showed him entering public areas of the casino multiple times, but nobody could figure out how he kept getting into employee corridors. They assumed he was tailgating through secured doors whenever employees walked through. That happens more often than people think. The report was filed. A photo was circulated internally. For a while, I stopped seeing him. Almost 3 weeks passed. I thought maybe he had been warned. Maybe security had scared him off. Then one Friday night he came back, and this time everything changed. It was around 4:30 in the morning. The casino was quieter than usual, not dead, just slower. I was finishing side work before shift change. One of the fastest routes back to the beverage station was through a service corridor employees used all the time. I had walked through it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. The corridor was long and narrow. Concrete walls, storage rooms, utility closets, no windows, no public access. I turned the corner and saw someone standing at the far end. At first I thought it was another employee. Then I recognized the baseball cap. My stomach dropped. He was standing completely still, waiting. I stopped walking. Something felt wrong immediately. Then I noticed the badge. He was wearing an employee badge around his neck. The problem was I knew it wasn't real. Maybe I can't explain how, but after years of working there, you recognize badges instantly. Something about it looked off. Wrong color, wrong size, wrong layout. I couldn't tell exactly. Just wrong. I turned around and started walking the other direction. His voice echoed down the hallway. Rachel. I froze. I had never told him my name, not once. I turned back. He smiled and said, Your manager asked me to walk you out. That made no sense. My manager wasn't even in that area, and nobody gets walked out by random employees. Security handles that, always. I didn't answer. He started walking toward me, slowly. Not running, not rushing, just walking. Then I saw what was hanging from his backpack. Zip ties, several of them. My entire body went cold. I immediately turned and walked away fast. Behind me, he called out again. Rachel. I started running. I wasn't thinking anymore, just moving. The hallway opened into another service area, and I burst through a door and almost collided with a maintenance worker. I remember yelling, not even words, just yelling. The maintenance worker looked confused. Then he looked behind me. The man had come through the door, still walking, still smiling. I pointed and said, That's him. The maintenance worker immediately radioed security. The guy finally stopped smiling. For the first time, he looked nervous. Then he turned and ran. Security footage later showed exactly what happened. The man sprinted through multiple service corridors trying to reach an exit, but casinos have cameras everywhere. Within minutes, security teams were tracking him throughout the building. He made it outside. He almost got away. Almost. Metro officers happened to be nearby on another call. Security directed them toward him, and they caught him in the parking garage. I didn't learn everything until later. What they found was terrifying. The badge was fake, completely fake, printed at home. The backpack contained zip ties, work gloves, a flashlight, a change of clothes, and a notebook. The notebook was the worst part. Inside were pages of notes, employee schedules, descriptions of workers, vehicle locations, shift changes, names. My name appeared multiple times. Apparently, he had been watching casino employees for months. Not just me, months. The police eventually determined he wasn't employed by the casino, never had been. He had been slipping into employee areas by following workers through secured doors, over and over. Nobody stopped him because he looked like he belonged. That was enough. His apartment search uncovered photographs of several casinos around the city. Employee entrances, parking lots, security gates, schedules. The investigators never told me everything. I don't think they wanted to. What they did tell me was enough. The detective strongly believed he had been planning to abduct someone. Whether it would have been me or somebody else, nobody knows. But they were confident he wasn't there by accident. I took a few weeks off after that. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The fact that he knew my name, the fact that he knew my schedule, that he had somehow blended into the background for months. What bothered me most was how ordinary he looked. If someone asked me to describe a dangerous person, I wouldn't have described him. He looked completely average. That's why nobody questioned him. That's why he lasted so long. About 6 months later, I ran into Marcus, the security guard, at a restaurant. We ended up talking about the whole thing again, and I asked him something that had been bothering me. How close was it? He looked at me for a second, then answered honestly, "Closer than you probably want to know." I asked what he meant. He told me investigators had reviewed footage from weeks before the arrest. The guy had followed me multiple times, not closely, never enough for me to notice, but enough to document patterns, where I parked, what routes I used, when I took breaks, when I left work, everything. Marcus said investigators believed the reason he approached me in the hallway that morning was because something had changed. They thought he felt ready for whatever he had been planning. I didn't ask any more questions after that. I didn't need to. Eventually, I transferred to a different property, different casino, different part of town. Life moved on. But even now, years later, I still think about that hallway. I think about how many times I walked past him assuming somebody else had verified who he was. I think about how many employees saw him and assumed he belonged there. And I think about that moment when he said my name from the far end of the corridor. Because that's when I finally understood something. The most frightening people aren't always hiding. Sometimes they're standing in plain sight for weeks, waiting for everyone around them to convince themselves there's nothing unusual to see. And if I had taken that shortcut on a different morning, if there hadn't been a maintenance worker nearby, or if I had ignored the feeling that something was wrong, I honestly don't know how this story would have ended. What I do know is that I trusted my instincts that day, and for once, they were exactly right. I still don't like staying in vacation rentals because of this, and I know that sounds dramatic, but if you ever find out someone has been inside the house with you while you were sleeping, it changes the way you look at every closet door, every air vent, every little sound in the wall. This happened in Las Vegas a few years ago. I was 26 at the time, and I went with 2 friends for a long weekend. Their names were Maya and Jenna. We weren't doing anything crazy. It was supposed to be one of those cheap Vegas trips where you split a place, go out one night, maybe do brunch, take pictures like you're having a better time than you are, and then fly home exhausted. We picked an Airbnb because hotels were expensive that weekend. I don't remember what event was going on, but everything on the strip was insane. The place we found was a small older house north of the strip, maybe 15 or 20 minutes away depending on traffic. It wasn't in a fancy neighborhood, but it wasn't scary either. Just one of those quiet streets with single-story houses, gravel yards, chain-link gates, old palm trees, and cars parked halfway up onto the curb. The listing looked normal. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, full kitchen, private backyard, free parking. The host had good reviews. Not amazing, but good enough. Most people said the place was clean and convenient. One review mentioned the neighborhood was a little rough, but people say that about half of Las Vegas if they're only used to hotels. We got there on a Friday afternoon. It was February, so it was cool enough that we were wearing light jackets. I remember that because later, when everything happened, one of the cops said something about the attic being survivable only because it wasn't summer. That sentence has stuck with me. The house had a lockbox on the front door. The host messaged us the code, and we let ourselves in. Right away, the place smelled faintly like cigarettes. even though the listing said no smoking. Not overwhelming, just that stale smell that sits in old drywall and curtains. Maya noticed it first and made a face. Jenna said, "It's Vegas," like that explained it, and honestly it kind of did. Inside, the house looked like the pictures, just cheaper in person. White walls, gray couch, fake plants, a little dining table with 4 chairs. The kitchen had mismatched plates and a Keurig. The living room had a TV mounted a little crooked over a console table. There were 2 bedrooms off a short hallway, and the bathroom was between them. The first bedroom had a queen bed. The second had 2 twins. I took the queen because I had booked the place, and Maya and Jenna took the twin room. Nobody cared. We dropped our bags, opened a couple windows because of the smell, and started doing what you do when you get to a rental. Checking drawers, looking for towels, figuring out the Wi-Fi, seeing what kind of coffee pods they had. That was when I noticed the locked door. It was at the end of the hallway, across from the bathroom. Not a bedroom door, smaller, more like a closet. It had one of those little brass doorknobs with a keyhole, and when I turned it, it didn't move. I called out, "There's a locked closet back here." Maya said, "Owner's closet." I said, "Probably." That was all. I'd stayed in rentals with locked closets before. Usually they kept cleaning supplies, extra linens, or personal stuff in there. It didn't bother me. The only thing that bothered me was that the door frame around it looked beat up, like the door had been opened and shut 1,000 times by someone who didn't care about the paint. There were scratches around the latch and some marks near the bottom, but again, it was an old house. I should say now that none of us felt in danger at first. It wasn't one of those situations where we walked in and immediately knew something was wrong. We were laughing, unpacking, fighting over outlet space, trying to decide where to eat. It felt normal. The first weird thing happened that night. We went to dinner, then to the strip, then walked around for a while. We got back sometime after 1 in the morning. We weren't drunk, but we were tired, and all 3 of us were in that state where your feet hurt and everything feels slightly annoying. When we walked in, the house felt different. Not different like someone had moved furniture, just different. The air smelled stronger. Cigarettes again, but fresher. Like someone had smoked inside recently. Maya noticed it immediately. She said, "Did we leave a window open?" We had left 2 windows cracked earlier, but Jenna had closed them before we left because she was worried about bugs or somebody getting in. I went to the living room windows. Both were shut. The lock on one of them was turned, but not fully lined up. I didn't know if it had been like that before. Jenna said maybe the smell came through the vents. The place had an old heating system, and we had turned it on low before leaving because the house was chilly. We decided that was probably it. Old vents, old house, cigarette smell baked into the walls. We got ready for bed. I remember standing in the hallway brushing my teeth while Maya and Jenna argued about whether to keep their bedroom door open or closed. The bathroom sink was slow to drain. The mirror had those little black spots around the edges where the silvering comes off. The light buzzed when it had been on too long, all normal old house stuff. While I was rinsing my mouth, I heard a soft thump from somewhere above me. I looked up. Nothing. It sounded like something had shifted in the ceiling. I stood there holding my toothbrush and listened. A second later, there was another sound, quieter this time, like a scrape. I opened the bathroom door and looked down the hall. The locked closet was directly across from me. The house was quiet. Maya and Jenna were still talking in their room. I told myself it was the heater or pipes. Then I heard it again, a very light dragging sound. I knocked on Maya and Jenna's door and asked if they heard anything. Maya said, "Like what?" I said, "Something in the ceiling." Jenna laughed and said, "Don't start." I didn't push it. I went to bed. That first night I slept badly. I kept waking up. The bed was too firm, the room smelled like dust, and every time the heater kicked on, the walls made little popping sounds. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up because I thought I heard someone cough. Not a loud cough, not from outside. A small, tight cough, like someone trying not to cough. I sat up in bed. My room was dark except for the blue glow from the charger near the nightstand. I listened for a long time. Nothing happened. I checked my phone. 4:12 in the morning. I thought about waking the girls up, but I felt stupid. People cough outside. Neighbors exist. Las Vegas houses are close together. Sound travels. So I stayed awake for maybe 20 minutes, then eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I mentioned it while we were making coffee. Maya immediately said, "I heard something too." That made my stomach tighten. I asked, "What did you hear?" She said she woke up around 3 and heard what sounded like someone walking slowly in the hallway. Not heavy steps, just floor creaks. She thought it was me going to the bathroom, so she didn't think anything of it. But when she got up to use the bathroom a little later, my door was closed and the hallway was empty. Jenna rolled her eyes and said old houses make noise. She wasn't being mean. She just didn't want the weekend to turn into us scaring ourselves. She said, "Please don't make this a ghost Airbnb thing. We're in Vegas. I'm trying to have brunch and make bad decisions." So we dropped it. That day was normal. We went to brunch. We walked through a few casinos. We lost money we shouldn't have lost. We went back to the house in the afternoon to change before going out again. Nothing seemed wrong. The locked closet was still locked. The windows were closed. Our stuff looked untouched. But there was one thing I noticed. My suitcase was unzipped, not wide open. Just the zipper was pulled maybe 6 inches farther than I remembered. I had this little habit of zipping my suitcase all the way closed because I'm paranoid about bugs getting into clothes when I travel. I knew I had closed it, but when I saw it slightly open, I still convinced myself I had done it. Maybe I was rushing. Maybe I grabbed something and forgot. Then Jenna came into my room and said, "Do either of you have a black phone charger?" I said no. Maya said hers was white. Jenna held up a black charging cable. It had been plugged into the outlet behind the couch in the living room. None of us recognized it. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then Maya said, "Maybe it belongs to the host." That made sense. A lot of rentals have random chargers. People leave them behind all the time. Jenna tossed it back on the console table and said, "Free charger." Again, we moved on. That night, we went out later than planned. We got back around 2:30. We were exhausted, and this time the second we walked in, all 3 of us stopped. The cigarette smell was strong. Fresh strong. Not old house strong. It smelled like someone had been standing in the living room smoking 5 minutes before we got there. Maya said, "Nope." Jenna looked annoyed now, not amused. She walked straight into the kitchen and checked the back door. It was locked. I checked the front door. Locked. Maya checked the windows. All closed. Then I noticed the ash. There was a tiny gray flake on the edge of the kitchen counter. I know how that sounds. One little piece of ash doesn't prove anything. But it hadn't been there earlier. The counters were white, and we had wiped them down because Maya spilled coffee that morning. It was right near the sink, a small smear of gray on the countertop. Jenna said maybe it came from our clothes after walking through casinos. I said none of us had smoked, and nobody had been around us smoking enough for ash to fall off us onto a counter. We argued quietly for a minute because none of us wanted to say what we were thinking. Finally, Maya said, "Should we message the host?" I did. I wrote something casual because I still felt ridiculous. "Hi. We noticed a strong smoke smell in the house when we returned tonight and wanted to check if anyone else has access to the property or if there's any issue with the vents." The host didn't answer right away. It was almost 3 in the morning, so that wasn't surprising. We pushed a dining chair in front of the front door, not because it would actually stop anyone, it just made us feel better. Jenna checked the back door twice. Maya put her suitcase in front of the bedroom door. I locked my bedroom door and put my shoes next to the bed in case I needed to get up fast. That was the second night. That was the night I heard him. I woke up sometime after 5. I don't know the exact time because I didn't check my phone right away. I woke up because there was a sound inside my room. At first I thought it was the heater again. Then I heard breathing. Slow, close. I stayed completely still. My room had a small closet with sliding doors. One of the doors had a full-length mirror on it. The closet was closed. The bedroom door was closed. The window was closed. I could see the outline of everything, because there was a streetlight outside, and the blinds let in thin strips of light. I held my breath and listened. There it was again, not in my room exactly, above my room. A slow exhale from the ceiling. My eyes went to the corner near the closet. There was a square panel in the ceiling that I hadn't noticed before. It was painted the same color as the ceiling, but now that I was looking at it in the low light, I could see the outline. An attic access panel. It was directly above the closet area. I don't remember moving. I just know I got out of bed as quietly as I could, grabbed my phone and shoes and went to the door. My hand was shaking so badly I had trouble turning the lock. When I opened the door, the hallway was dark. I stepped out and walked quickly to Maya and Jenna's room. Their door was blocked from the inside with a suitcase, so I had to whisper their names through the crack. "Maya, Jenna, wake up." Maya answered first, half asleep and annoyed. "What?" I said. "Open the door." She heard my voice and knew something was wrong. The suitcase moved. The door opened just enough for me to slip in. I told them there was an attic panel in my bedroom and I heard someone breathing. Jenna sat up fast. Maya said, "Stop," I said. "I'm serious." We stood there in their room, all whispering over each other. Jenna wanted to leave immediately. Maya wanted to call police. I wanted both. The problem was our bags were in different rooms, and the front door was at the end of the hall near my bedroom. We were in pajamas, barefoot except for me holding my shoes, and our car keys were in my purse on the kitchen counter. That was my fault. I always dropped my purse by the kitchen when I walked in. My wallet, keys, everything were in it. Jenna said, "We're leaving without the keys." I said, "How?" She said, "We go outside and call an Uber." Maya was already on her phone, dialing 911. Before she could hit call, we heard something from my bedroom, a soft creak, then a dull thud. Not above us, inside the room. We all stopped breathing. Maya's phone lit up her face. She whispered, "Did that come from your room?" I nodded. Then we heard another sound. My bedroom door moving. It was barely audible, just the faint click of the latch. Someone was in my room. I had left that door open. Jenna started crying without making noise. Maya pressed call. The dispatcher answered, and Maya whispered that someone was inside our rental house. I don't remember everything she said, but I remember her saying the address wrong because she was panicking, then correcting herself by reading it from the Airbnb app. While she was on the phone, the hallway floor creaked. One step, then another, slow, not rushing. Someone was coming down the hallway. We all moved back from the bedroom door. Jenna grabbed the small lamp from the nightstand like it was a weapon. I remember thinking it still had the cord attached to the wall, and she was going to yank it out if she swung it. The doorknob turned. Not hard, just slowly. The suitcase was still against the door. It shifted when the door pressed inward. Maya whispered to the dispatcher, "He's at the door." The knob stopped moving. There was silence. Then a man's voice said, "Hello?" It wasn't loud, it was calm. That was worse. None of us answered. He said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." That sentence made no sense. Our car was in the driveway. Our things were everywhere. The lights had been on earlier. He knew someone was there. Maya was shaking so hard the phone screen kept flashing against her cheek. The dispatcher must have told her to stay quiet because she stopped talking. The man outside the door said, "I'm leaving." Then we heard him step away. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But instead of walking toward the front door, the footsteps went the other direction, toward the bathroom, toward the locked closet. We heard the closet door open, that locked closet door we hadn't been able to open, the one at the end of the hall. There was rustling, a small metallic sound, then another creak above us. He was going back up. Jenna mouthed, "Window." The twin bedroom had one window facing the side yard. It was small, but not tiny. We went to it as quietly as possible. Maya stayed on the phone. I unlocked it and tried to lift it, but it stuck. Old window, painted edges. I pulled harder. It made a loud scraping sound. All three of us froze. From above the ceiling, directly over the hallway, something shifted. Then a man coughed. Jenna put both hands over her mouth. I pulled the window again, and this time it opened. The screen was the kind that popped out from the inside if you pushed the tabs. My hands were shaking too much to work them at first. Maya handed the phone to Jenna, came over and helped me. We got the screen loose and shoved it outward into the gravel. The drop wasn't far, maybe 4 feet, but we were panicked and clumsy. Jenna went first. She scraped her shin on the frame and landed hard outside. Maya went next. I went last and hit the gravel on my knees. The side yard was narrow, fenced and dark. We ran toward the front, but there was a chain-link gate with a latch that had one of those little carabiner clips through it. I couldn't get it open. My fingers wouldn't work. Behind us, inside the house, a light turned on. The bathroom light. It lit the hallway and spilled through the window we had just climbed out of. Maya whispered, "Go." I finally got the clip off. The gate made the loudest metal screech I have ever heard. We ran out onto the driveway and into the street. We didn't have car keys. We didn't have shoes except mine in my hand. Jenna was barefoot. Maya was still holding the phone, talking to the dispatcher. We ran to the house across the street because it had a porch light on and a pickup truck in the driveway. Maya rang the doorbell over and over while Jenna and I kept looking back at the Airbnb. Nobody answered at first. Then an older man opened the door holding a pistol down at his side. That scared us almost as much as the house did. Maya immediately yelled, "We called police. Someone is in our Airbnb. Please help us." The man looked across the street at the house. Then he stepped back and told us to come inside. His wife came out a second later in a robe, and she brought us into the living room. They were both surprisingly calm. The wife gave Jenna a towel because her leg was bleeding. The husband locked the door and stood at the front window watching the house. The cops arrived fast, maybe 6 or 7 minutes after we got across the street, though it felt longer. 2 patrol cars came first, then another. Officers went to the front door of the Airbnb. One of them knocked and announced themselves. Nobody answered. The host finally messaged me while we were sitting in the neighbor's living room. "Hi, no one else should be at the property. The smoke smell may be from previous guests. I'll send cleaner tomorrow." I read it and started crying. Not because of the message itself, because it was so normal and useless compared to what was happening. The police entered the house through the front door because we had left it unlocked when we came in earlier, and I guess the man hadn't locked it behind us. We watched from across the street as flashlights moved through the windows. They searched the rooms. Then they came back out and asked us where the attic access was. I told them about the panel in my room and the locked closet in the hallway. One officer asked, "Locked from your side?" I said, "We couldn't open it." He looked at another officer, and I could tell by their faces that this had stopped being some vague trespassing call. They went back inside. For a while, nothing happened. Then more officers arrived, then a fire truck, then animal control, weirdly enough, though I later found out that was because they thought there might be a dead animal in the attic due to the smell. The neighbors made coffee. I couldn't drink it. My hands were still shaking. Jenna kept saying, "He was in there. He was in there." Maya was silent and staring at the house. After maybe 45 minutes, an officer came across the street and asked us to confirm the owner's name and the booking information. I showed him the app. He asked if the host had given us permission to access the locked closet. I said no. He asked if we had seen anyone else around the property. We said no. Then he said, "We found evidence someone has been staying inside." That was how he phrased it. Evidence someone has been staying inside. Not someone broke in. Not someone might have been there. Someone had been staying inside. They didn't find him in the attic at first. That was the part that scared me the most. They found bedding, water bottles, food wrappers, cigarette butts in a coffee can, a small battery-powered fan, and a black backpack in the attic space above the hallway and bedrooms. They also found a cheap prepaid phone, a charger, and a jar that I don't want to describe too much, but it made it clear he had been spending long periods of time up there without coming down. The attic connected to the locked closet through a rough opening in the ceiling. The closet had shelves and cleaning supplies near the front, which is probably why it looked like a normal owner's closet if you opened it quickly. But behind the shelves, there was a small step stool and access to the attic space. The door lock was not really meant to keep people out. It was meant to make guests stop checking. The host claimed she had no idea. I'll get to that. The police searched the house and yard, but the man wasn't there. They believed he had escaped out the back when we climbed out the bedroom window. There was a back gate that led into an alley, and one officer found it open. There were fresh shoe prints in the dusty ground behind the house. We had been inside the neighbor's house for maybe an hour when an officer came in and told us they needed one of us to walk through the Airbnb with them and identify our belongings. None of us wanted to go. Eventually I did, because most of the booking and payment information was mine. I walked across the street with two officers. The sun was starting to come up, that ugly gray-blue morning light that makes everything look worse. The house looked completely ordinary from the outside. That made me angry for some reason. It looked like nothing had happened. Inside, it smelled terrible. Not just cigarettes now. Sweat, dust, old food, that trapped human smell. The officers had pulled the attic panel down in my bedroom. There was a folding ladder attached to it, the kind that hides in the ceiling. I hadn't even noticed because the seam had been painted over, and the light fixture was near it. One of the officers showed me where the dust on the top of the closet door had been disturbed. He said the man had probably been coming down through the attic panel when we were gone, then going back up before we returned. My suitcase was open wider now. Clothes had been moved, not thrown around, moved carefully. My makeup bag was unzipped. My spare cash was still there. My laptop was still there. Nothing obvious had been stolen. That felt worse. If he had stolen something, at least I could tell myself it was about money. In the bathroom, the medicine cabinet was open. One of Jenna's hair ties was on the sink. The shower curtain had been pulled halfway closed, even though none of us had showered since the previous afternoon. In the kitchen, my purse was on the counter. My keys were inside. My wallet was inside. Nothing taken. The black Charger Jenna had found behind the couch was gone. The locked closet door was open now. It had been forced by police, and the frame was cracked. Inside were towels, a vacuum, some cleaning products, and a plastic storage bin labeled Owner. Behind the bin, the shelves had been pushed aside. There was a narrow opening above the back wall leading upward into the attic. The officer told me not to touch anything. I didn't want to touch anything. I asked him if the man had been watching us. He didn't answer directly. He said, "There were openings." I asked, "What does that mean?" He pointed to the air return vent high on the hallway wall. The cover was slightly loose. From the attic side, someone had bent part of the ducting away. If you were in the attic, you could look through the vent into the hallway. Then he pointed to the light fixture in the bathroom. The cover was frosted glass, but one side had a gap where it didn't sit right. He said there was a space above it too. I felt sick. I asked if he could see into the bedrooms. The officer paused and said, "Some areas, yes." I don't remember much after that except saying, "I'm done," and walking back outside. We didn't stay another minute. The neighbors let us use their bathroom and gave Jenna a pair of old flip-flops. We got our things later after police cleared what we were allowed to take. We booked a regular hotel near the airport and spent the rest of the trip inside the room with the deadbolt on and a chair against the door. The host called me around noon. She sounded shaken, but not shaken enough for me. She kept saying she was so sorry, and that she had no idea how this happened. She said the locked closet was for cleaners and maintenance items. She said nobody should have access except her cleaning person, and a handyman she used sometimes. She said the attic had never been used for anything. I asked her when she had last been inside the house. She admitted she lived in California and hadn't personally been there in months. That made me so angry I couldn't speak for a second. She said she had local cleaners and a handyman, and they handled everything. I asked who had keys. She said the cleaner, the handyman, maybe one backup cleaner, and there was also a spare key hidden in a lockbox in the backyard for emergencies. A spare key in a lockbox in the backyard. I asked if the code was different from the guest lockbox code. She didn't answer right away. That told me enough. Later, the police explained that the man probably didn't need to break in. He likely had access at some point, learned the lockbox code, and kept using it. It also sounded like he knew the layout well enough to hide before guests arrived and move around when they were gone. They eventually identified him. I won't use his name because I don't want this connected to anything public. but he had worked for a small maintenance company that serviced short-term rentals around Las Vegas. Not full-time with the host, not exactly her employee, but he had done work at the property before. He had a record, but not for anything that would have immediately made you think man hiding in an attic. Mostly theft, trespassing, drug stuff, and one previous incident where he was caught sleeping in a vacant rental property. He was arrested 2 days later. Not in the house. At another short-term rental. That part still makes me cold. Apparently he was found in the garage of a different property in Henderson after cleaners arrived and noticed food wrappers behind a water heater. Police connected him through the backpack he left behind at our Airbnb and the prepaid phone. I don't know every legal detail, and honestly I stopped following after a while because it made me feel like I was still living inside it. But he was charged with several things, including burglary and stalking-related charges. I know he took a plea because an officer called me months later and told me I wouldn't have to testify. The host refunded us. Airbnb refunded us. That all happened after multiple calls and reports and sending screenshots and police information. At the time, I didn't even care about the money. I cared about the fact that we had slept under him. That's the part people always react to. When I tell the story, someone always says, "You mean he was in the attic the whole time?" Yes, at least part of the time. Maybe not every second. Maybe he left when we were gone and came back. Maybe he used the closet, the attic, and the backyard lockbox to move in and out. I don't know, but based on what police found, he had definitely been above us while we were sleeping. He had definitely come down when we were away, and at least once he came down while we were inside the house. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep with closed closet doors. Then I couldn't sleep with open closet doors either. I checked vents in hotel rooms. I checked attic panels. I checked behind shower curtains. I would wake up in the middle of the night convinced I heard breathing above me. Maya handled it by getting angry. She left a long review, reported the listing, and contacted every department she could think of. Jenna handled it by pretending she was fine until she had a panic attack in a hotel in Phoenix 3 months later because the room smelled faintly like cigarettes. I handled it by becoming the most annoying person on earth whenever I travel. Now, when I stay anywhere, I check every door. I check windows. I check closets. I check for attic access. I check vents if they look loose. I look for interior doors that lock from the wrong side. I don't care if people think I'm paranoid. People can laugh if they want. The thing is, the scariest part wasn't even seeing him. We never really saw him clearly. We saw the bathroom light turn on. We heard his voice through a door. We heard him move above us. We saw what he left behind. That was enough. I still remember the way he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." That was the line that stuck with me most because it was such an obvious lie. He knew we were there. He knew our bags were there. He knew our car was there. He knew 3 women were sleeping in that house. He had probably known since the moment we arrived. I think he said it because he wanted us to open the door, or because he wanted to sound harmless, or because people like that practice sounding normal. The neighbors across the street ended up being the reason we were okay. I sent them flowers afterward and a thank you card, but that never felt like enough. The older woman wrote back and said something I still think about. She said she and her husband almost didn't answer the door because it was so early and they were scared too. Then she said, "I'm glad we did. I'm glad they did too. I'm also glad Maya called police before we tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. I'm glad Jenna thought of the window. I'm glad the window opened. I'm glad the gate latch finally came loose. There were so many little things that had to go right after so many little things had gone wrong. I know people like clean endings where everything makes sense, and the bad guy explains himself. That didn't happen. I never learned exactly how long he had been hiding there, or what he planned to do if we hadn't gotten out. Nobody sat me down and gave me the full story in a neat order. Real life usually doesn't work that way. But I know enough. I know we rented a house in Las Vegas for a cheap weekend trip. I know there was a locked closet we ignored because locked closets are normal in rentals. I know the cigarette smell wasn't old smoke in the walls. I know the charger behind the couch belonged to him. I know he came into my room. I know he stood outside my friend's door and tried the knob. And I know that when I woke up and heard breathing above my bed, I wasn't imagining it. There really was a man in the ceiling. and for 2 nights, we slept right underneath him. I worked security at one of the bigger hotel casinos on the Las Vegas Strip for almost 9 years. I'm not going to name the property because I still know people there, and I don't want to turn this into some lawsuit thing. It was one of those huge places where you could spend 2 days inside and still not know where half the hallways went. Casino floor, hotel towers, restaurants, convention space, retail, pools, garages, employee areas, loading docks, valet, rideshare, all of it stacked together and running all night. I was a security supervisor on graveyard shift. My normal hours were 10 at night to 6 in the morning, which meant I saw the Strip at its worst. Not the fun version people post online, the other version. People crying in elevator lobbies, guys passed out in restroom stalls, couples screaming at each other near the taxi line, bachelor parties that started with matching shirts and ended with one guy sitting barefoot on the curb, tourists losing wallets, phones, watches, wedding rings, luggage, sometimes each other. Most nights were annoying, not scary. You got used to the noise and the smell and the same problems repeating themselves. Alcohol did most of the damage, drugs did the rest. Every once in a while you got something that felt different. Not louder, not crazier, just wrong in a way you couldn't immediately explain. This happened on a Saturday night in August. It was hot even after midnight. The kind of heat that comes up from the concrete and hangs under the casino entrance where the cars idle. The Strip was packed because there had been a fight at T-Mobile Arena earlier, plus some big conference in town. We were full. Valet was slammed, rideshare was backed up, and the front entrance had that normal weekend mess where everyone thinks their problem is the only problem happening. I started my shift in the security office, checked the log, grabbed a radio, and took over from the swing supervisor. He told me there had already been 2 medicals, one domestic, one guy trespassed for throwing chips at a dealer, and a drunk guest who tried to walk into the high-limit room wearing only boxers and one shoe. That was normal enough. The first thing that stood out came from one of our valet guys named Marco. Around 11:30 he called over the radio and asked if we had casino medicals staged outside. I asked him to repeat that. He said there were 2 guys near the valet entrance wearing dark pants and navy shirts that looked medical. Not uniforms exactly, but close enough that guests were walking up to them. They had little patches on the sleeves, and one of them had a black duffel bag with a white cross taped on the side. I asked if they were with the fire department or private ambulance. Marco said, "No idea, they're just standing there." I was in the camera room when he said it, so I had one of our operators pull up the porte cochere cameras. That was the main covered entrance where guests came in from valet and taxi. It was bright, crowded, and full of movement, so it took a second to find them. Then, I saw them. 2 men, both probably in their 30s or 40s. One was taller and thin with a shaved head. The other was shorter, heavier, with a trimmed beard. They were standing near the edge of the valet area, just outside the main traffic flow. They weren't blocking anyone. They weren't acting drunk. They weren't holding signs or talking to security. They looked like they were waiting for something. Their shirts were navy polos. From a distance they could pass for EMTs if you weren't paying attention. But they didn't have radios clipped to their shoulders. No duty belts. No real equipment. No agency name I could make out. The patches were small and vague. That bothered me right away. Real responders on the Strip are not subtle. You know who they are. I told Marco not to confront them by himself and sent one of my guards, Javi, outside to make contact. Javi had been with us for 6 years. He was calm with drunk people, which was harder than it sounds. He was also one of those guys who noticed everything, without making a big show of it. I watched on camera as Javi walked up to them near the valet podium. He stood at an angle, not too close. I couldn't hear the conversation from the camera feed, but I could see the taller guy smile and shake his head. The shorter one looked toward the street, then back at Javi. Javi came over the radio a minute later. He said, "They're saying they're waiting for someone from a ride share, not medical. Just dressed like that because they came from work." I asked, "Where do they work?" Long pause. Then Javi said, "They said an urgent care off Flamingo. No name." That didn't make it illegal for them to stand there. People wear scrubs and uniforms and work clothes in casinos all the time. Still, something about it bothered me. If they were waiting for a rideshare, they were standing in the wrong place. If they were waiting for a person, they were watching the wrong direction. They kept looking at drunk guests coming out of the lobby. I told Javi to keep them moving if they started approaching people. A few minutes later, they walked off toward the sidewalk. That should have been it. It wasn't. Around 12:15, we got a call from the north entrance. One of the cocktail servers was on her break outside and said 2 men in medical shirts had tried to talk a drunk woman into going with them. The woman was sitting on a low wall with her heels in her hand, and the 2 men were telling her they were there to help her. The server said they were not touching her, but they were standing close, and the woman looked confused. By the time my guard got there, the men were gone. The woman was still there. Her name was Rachel. She was from Phoenix. She was with a group of friends for a birthday, and she was drunk but not unconscious or anything. She told us 2 guys had asked if she was okay and said her friends had sent them. She almost believed them because one of them knew her first name. That made my stomach drop. I asked how they knew her name. She pointed at her wrist. She had one of those club wristbands from a place inside our property. Her name wasn't on it. Then she said maybe they heard her friends calling her earlier. She didn't know. We found her friends in one of the bars 20 minutes later. None of them had called anyone. None of them knew the 2 men. At that point, I put out an internal notice over the security channel. 2 unidentified males, possible fake medical personnel, approaching intoxicated guests near exterior entrances. Do not confront alone. Notify supervisor. Observe and report location. This was not the first time we had dealt with people pretending to be someone else. Fake promoters, fake VIP hosts, fake rideshare drivers, fake bottle service runners, fake casino employees. It happens more than people realize. The Strip is full of people who look official if you're drunk enough and tired enough. But fake paramedics were new for me. I went outside after that and walked the valet area myself. The air smelled like exhaust, weed, and hot pavement. There were taxis rolling through, limos idling, valets jogging back and forth, people arguing with drivers, people laughing too loud, people filming themselves walking in. The casino doors kept opening and closing behind me, dumping cold air onto the entrance for 2 seconds at a time. I didn't see the men. I checked the rideshare area next. At our property, rideshare wasn't right at the main door. Guests had to follow signs toward a side pickup lane near the garage. That area always made me nervous because it was busy, but not supervised the same way valet was. There were cameras, but less staff. People stood there staring at phones, not paying attention. Drivers came and went. Everyone was looking for someone. I had another guard, Tanya, check the taxi line and south doors. Nothing. For about an hour, the night moved on. We handled a fight near a blackjack table, a woman who lost her purse, and a man who was convinced the slot machine owed him $300 because it felt ready. Normal Saturday night stuff. Then, at 1:37 in the morning, dispatch called me directly. Possible medical at rideshare, she said. Male guest very intoxicated. 2 unknown males attempting to escort him off property. I was already walking before she finished. I told Javi and Tanya to meet me there. I told cameras to pull up rideshare and stay on it. The radio traffic got messy because 3 people started talking at once. Marco said he saw the 2 men again near valet, but they were moving toward the side entrance. Cameras said they had them near the escalator that led down to rideshare. Dispatch said a guest had called from the lobby saying her brother was missing. I asked for the missing guest's description. White male, late 20s, green shirt, jeans, brown hair, drunk, name Evan. Camera said, that's who they're with. I started moving faster. Our rideshare area was down a wide hallway, past a bank of elevators and a set of glass doors, then outside to a covered pickup lane. It was not hidden, but it was separated from the main casino energy. The sound changed when you got there. Less casino noise, more engines and tires and voices bouncing off concrete. When I came through the doors, I saw them about 30 yards away. The tall shaved head guy had Evan by the left arm. The shorter guy was on Evan's right side. Evan was upright but barely. His head was down, and his feet were dragging more than walking. They were guiding him toward a white van parked past the normal pickup spots, near the far curb where vehicles weren't supposed to wait. The van did not have ambulance markings. It was a plain white cargo van with a dent in the rear door and no side windows except the front passenger area. Javi came in from the other side and got there before me. He called out, "Hey, stop right there." The men stopped, but only for a second. The shorter one turned with an annoyed look, like Javi had interrupted him doing a job. Javi said, "Let go of him." The taller guy said something I couldn't hear. Evan lifted his head a little. He looked lost. His face was shiny with sweat, and his mouth was open, like he was trying to talk but couldn't get the words lined up. I was close enough then to hear Javi say, "Who are you with?" The shorter guy said, "Medical transport." Javi said, "What company?" The shorter guy said, "We were called for him." Javi said, "What company?" That's when the taller guy tried to move Evan again. He didn't yank him hard. He just turned his body toward the van and pulled Evan with him, like the conversation was over. Javi stepped in front of them. I told them they were not leaving with the guest. I said we had Metro coming, even though at that exact second I had not called Metro yet. I wanted them to think we already had. The shorter guy stared at me. His face changed. Up until then, he had been playing irritated professional. Once I said Metro, he looked angry, not scared. Angry. He said, "You want this guy to die out here?" I said, "Put him down and step back." Evan mumbled something. I still don't know what he said. It sounded like my sister, but I'm not sure. The taller guy let go of Evan's arm. For half a second I thought they were going to give up and walk away. Then the shorter guy swung the black flashlight he had been holding at his side. He hit Javi in the face. It was fast and ugly. Not a wild punch. He brought it up and across, and the metal end caught Javi near the cheekbone and nose. I heard the sound of it over everything else. Javi dropped to one knee and grabbed his face. Evan fell backward onto the curb. I went for the shorter guy, and Tanya came running in from my left. The tall guy grabbed Evan under the arms and tried to drag him toward the van. That was the moment when everything stopped being suspicious and became exactly what it was. They were taking him. I hit my radio and yelled for Metro, medical, and all available security to rideshare. Then I grabbed the shorter guy's shirt as he tried to run past me. He twisted out of it, and the collar ripped in my hand. Tanya got between the taller guy and the van, but he shoved her hard enough that she hit the metal post near the pickup sign. The shorter guy ran toward the driver's side of the van. The taller guy still had Evan by the upper body, trying to lift him off the ground. Evan was dead weight. He was too drunk to help himself, but not so drunk that he didn't understand something bad was happening. He started making this panicked sound, not yelling words, just a strained noise from his throat. Tanya got back up and kicked the duffel bag away from the tall guy's feet. The bag fell open. I saw rolls of duct tape inside. I saw a stack of towels. I saw plastic zip ties. That image has stayed with me more than the blood. Javi was back on his feet by then, bleeding heavily from his nose and mouth. He had one hand pressed to his face and his other hand on his radio. He moved toward Evan even though I told him to stay back. The shorter guy got the van door open. I knew if that van moved, we were in trouble. Even if we had the plate, even if cameras caught it, Evan could be gone in 30 seconds. The strip is crowded, but there are 100 ways to disappear from one property to another if you know where you're going. I looked around for anything to block the van. There was a valet luggage cart near the wall, one of the big brass ones guests use for suitcases. I grabbed it and shoved it as hard as I could toward the front of the van. It rolled crooked, hit the bumper, and bounced sideways. It didn't stop anything by itself, but it bought us a second because the shorter guy had to step back and kick it away from the tire. Marco came running from valet with 2 other valet guys behind him. I yelled at them to block the exit. They didn't ask questions. They grabbed traffic cones and the portable sign stands we used for lane closures and started dragging them into the drive lane. The shorter guy jumped into the driver's seat and started the van. The tall guy gave up on lifting Evan and ran for the passenger door. That was when one of the valet guys, a kid named Andre, did something that was either brave or stupid or both. He threw one of those weighted sign bases under the front wheel. It hit the pavement flat and slid right in front of the tire. The van lurched forward, climbed it halfway, and stopped just long enough for our first group of backup guards to reach the passenger side. The tall guy never made it inside. 2 guards grabbed him at the door. He fought hard. He hit one of them in the throat and tried to bite another. I got there as they brought him down against the side of the van. He kept saying, "We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything." The shorter guy threw the van in reverse. That sound made everyone move. The tires squealed. The van backed into a concrete trash can hard enough to crack the plastic housing around it. Then it shot forward again. I was standing near the passenger side and I saw the shorter guy's face through the windshield. He was looking past us, not at us. He wasn't trying to get his friend. He wasn't trying to explain. He was trying to get out. The front tire rolled over the sign base this time and dragged it. The van jumped forward maybe 10 feet before one of the valet carts clipped the side mirror. It didn't stop him, but it knocked him off angle. He swerved, hit a row of metal bollards near the pedestrian walkway, and the van stalled or got stuck. I'm still not sure which. The front bumper was wedged against one of the posts, and steam started coming from under the hood. The driver's door opened, and the shorter guy ran. He didn't get far. He ran straight toward the rideshare escalator, which was probably the worst direction he could have chosen by then. 2 Metro officers were coming down from the main casino level because dispatch had called them the second I yelled over the radio. I didn't see the tackle, but I heard it. Then I heard one of the officers yelling at him to stop resisting. The whole thing, from first contact to both men being down, was probably less than 3 minutes. It felt much longer. Evan was still on the ground near the curb. Tanya was with him. He was conscious and crying. Not loud crying, more like he couldn't control it. He kept saying, "I thought they were helping me." His sister got there right after that. Her name was Melissa. She came running out with another woman, both of them barefoot, both holding their shoes. She dropped next to him and started yelling his name. He tried to sit up, but Tanya kept him down until the real medical team arrived. Javi sat on the curb with blood all down the front of his uniform. His left eye was already swelling. I asked him how many fingers I was holding up, and he told me to stop acting like his mother. That was how I knew he was mostly okay. The real paramedics got there maybe 4 or 5 minutes later. Real uniforms, real gear, real radio traffic. No confusion about who they were. They checked Evan first, then Javi, then Tanya's shoulder. Metro took over the scene, and we started preserving footage. That part of the job was automatic. Save the cameras, lock down the area, get names of witnesses, photograph the duffel bag where it landed, keep everyone who touched anything away from it, hold the van in place. Don't let curious guests wander into the scene. That was harder than you would think. People were filming. Of course they were. A man had blood on his shirt. 2 suspects were cuffed. A van was smoking against a bollard, and half the rideshare lane was blocked off. Some drunk guy asked me if this meant Uber was canceled. Another guest tried to walk around the crime scene tape because his driver was right there. I had to put my hand out and stop him while Javi was being loaded onto a stretcher behind me. Metro searched the van after getting approval from their supervisor. I was not right next to them, but I saw enough when the rear doors opened. There were blankets in the back. Not folded hotel blankets, cheap gray ones. There were more zip ties, a roll of duct tape, bottles of water, a plastic container with loose pills, 2 prepaid phones, and a stack of wallets and IDs in a grocery bag. There was also a wheelchair folded against the wall, but it wasn't a medical wheelchair. It looked like something they bought secondhand. One wheel was bent. That made the whole thing worse. The taller guy had been carrying a small notepad in his pocket. I only saw it because one of the officers removed it and put it in an evidence bag. Later, one of the detectives asked us for footage from earlier in the night because there were descriptions written in it. Not full names, but things like green shirt, drunk male, sister red dress, blonde birthday group, older guy blue jacket jackpot, and woman alone north wall. They had been watching people. That was the part that changed how I thought about the whole night. It wasn't random. They weren't just hanging around hoping someone vulnerable would fall into their path. They were picking people, following groups, watching who separated, and waiting for the right moment to step in with a story. Evan was 28 and from Wisconsin. He was in town with his sister and a group of friends. They had gone to dinner, then a club, then back to the casino. Around 1 in the morning, Evan got too drunk and said he wanted to go upstairs. His sister was trying to close out a tab, so she told him to wait by the entrance to the bar. He didn't. He wandered out. The two men found him near the restrooms first. That's what we later saw on camera. The taller one approached him and said something. Evan shook his head. The shorter one came up on the other side. They didn't grab him there. They walked with him. Very casual, very calm. To anyone passing by, it looked like two helpful guys assisting their drunk friend. They moved him across the casino floor slowly, past the slots, past the lobby bar, past dozens of people, past one of my guards too. That bothered me for a long time, but I understood how it happened. Evan wasn't yelling. They weren't dragging him yet. They looked like they knew him. That is one of the easiest ways to get away with something in public. Act annoyed and responsible, and most people will assume it's family business. The only reason it didn't work was because they had gotten greedy earlier. Rachel, the woman on the wall, had reported them. The cocktail server had reported them. Marco had reported them. By the time they tried to walk Evan out, we were already looking for men dressed like fake medical staff. If they had worn normal clothes, I don't know if we would have caught it in time. That thought still bothers me. Metro interviewed me around 4 in the morning in a small office behind the security desk. My shirt was dirty, and my hands smelled like rubber from the valet cart handles. I remember looking at the clock and feeling irritated because my shift still had 2 hours left, which was a stupid thing to think after what had just happened. The detective asked me if either suspect had claimed to be paramedics. I told him they used the words medical transport. I told him they implied they had been called for Evan. I told him they never gave a company name. I told him one of them had said, "You want this guy to die out here?" The detective wrote that down. Then he asked if our property had any agreement with outside transport teams for intoxicated guests. I said absolutely not. We called Real Medical if someone needed medical. We called Metro if someone was a danger to themselves or others. We did not hand intoxicated guests to two strangers in polos outside rideshare. He nodded like he already knew that, but needed me to say it. Javi ended up with a broken nose, a fractured cheekbone, and a cut inside his mouth. He was out for a while. Tanya had a bruised shoulder and a sprained wrist. Evan had scrapes, a split lip from falling, and whatever was in his system from drinking. His blood work later showed he had not been drugged, which surprised me. He was just extremely drunk, separated, and easy to manipulate. That made the whole thing feel more real. People want stories like this to have some obvious trick. A spiked drink, a secret code, a hidden tunnel. Most of the time it's simpler. A person gets drunk. Their friends look away. A stranger pretends to help. Evan's sister came back the next afternoon with her father. She wanted to thank us. I was not there when she came in, but Tanya told me about it. Melissa cried when she saw the rideshare area in daylight. She said she had been mad at Evan earlier that night because he kept wandering off. She kept saying she should have walked him upstairs herself. Tanya told her the truth. The blame belonged to the men who tried to take him. I wish that kind of thing actually helped people feel better. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The property made changes after that. More lighting in the side pickup area. More visible security near rideshare on weekends. Better radio codes for suspicious impersonators. Valet staff were told to report anyone wearing unofficial medical or transport clothing who approached guests. We also started reminding guests through signage to verify rideshare plates and never leave with anyone claiming to be medical or transportation unless casino security confirmed it. Corporate hated the wording at first because they didn't want to scare guests. That was always the push and pull. Make people safe, but don't remind them too much that danger exists. The incident did not make the news in any major way. A few people posted clips online, but most of them were useless. A smoking van, security running, someone yelling. The kind of video people watch for 6 seconds and then forget. There was no clean explanation in the caption, so it became whatever commenters wanted it to be. Fight at casino, drunk guy arrested, Uber driver crash. Nobody knew what had almost happened. I followed the case for a while through people who still talk to Metro. I know both men had records. I know they were not licensed medical workers. I know the van was registered to someone who claimed it had been sold for cash weeks earlier. I know at least 3 IDs found in the van belonged to tourists who had reported being robbed after leaving strip properties in the previous month. I don't know if those victims were taken the same way or if the men just stole the IDs some other way. The shorter guy, the one who hit Javi, eventually took a plea. The taller one tried to say he thought they were helping Evan and that the zip ties were for moving equipment. Nobody believed that. Not after the video, not after the duffel bag, not after the notepad. Evan and his sister flew home 2 days later. Before they left, Evan wrote an email to our security director. I read it because the director forwarded it to everyone involved. It wasn't long. He said he didn't remember much after leaving the bar, but he remembered looking at the van and realizing he didn't know the men holding him. He remembered trying to ask for his sister. He remembered one of the men telling him she was already waiting. That line made me cold. She's already waiting. That's all it would have taken. He was drunk. He was scared. He wanted his sister. A stranger said the thing that made sense in his head, and he went with them. For a while after that, I got very strict about the entrances. Probably too strict. I stopped people for things that might have been nothing. Delivery drivers without clear paperwork, private security contractors from nearby events, guys in reflective vests who looked like they belonged somewhere but couldn't explain where. Most of them were harmless. A few got annoyed. One called me a rent-a-cop and told me I was ruining his night. I didn't care. About 2 months later, I saw a man in a navy polo standing near the taxi line with a black bag. My whole body reacted before my brain caught up. I crossed the entrance so fast that Marco looked up from the valet podium and started moving too. The man turned out to be a real nurse from California waiting for his wife. He had hospital shoes on and a name badge from an actual hospital in his pocket. He was embarrassed when I asked questions, but he understood once I explained just enough. That was how it stayed with me. Not as nightmares, not every night, just small reactions. A certain color shirt, a plain white van near a curb. Someone saying they were there to help but not saying who sent them. People think the dangerous parts of Las Vegas are the alleys, the parking garages, the blocks off the strip where the lights thin out. Those places can be dangerous, sure. But what scared me after that night was how close those men stayed to the front door. They didn't hide in the dark. They stood under the bright lights, next to valets and cameras and hundreds of witnesses, because they understood something most normal people don't want to admit. Crowds don't always protect you. Sometimes crowds make it easier. Everyone assumes someone else knows what's happening. Everyone sees 2 men helping a drunk guy and decides it is not their business. Everyone wants to get to their room, their ride, their reservation, their next drink. A casino entrance at 1:30 in the morning is loud and crowded and full of people looking everywhere except directly at the person who needs help. The last time I saw Javi before I left that job, his nose still looked a little crooked. He joked about it, but I knew it bothered him. He came back to work after a few weeks and acted like nothing had changed. That was Javi. He didn't make speeches. He just did the job. One night, maybe a year later, I was walking through the same rideshare area with a new guard. It was busy again. Same heat, same engines, same people staring at phones. A drunk guy was sitting on the curb with his head between his knees, while his friends argued over which car was theirs. The new guard laughed and said, "Just another Vegas night." I looked at the curb where Evan had been. Then I looked at the pickup lane where the van had stopped against the bollard. The concrete trash can had been replaced. The damaged sign base was long gone. The cameras had been upgraded. Nothing looked special anymore. I told the new guard to watch the people who look helpful. He thought I was giving him some old security guy advice, and I guess I was. But I meant it exactly the way I said it. Watch the people who look helpful, because the men who tried to take Evan didn't look like monsters. They didn't look crazy. They didn't scream. They didn't wave weapons around. They used calm voices, clean shirts, and the kind of confidence people mistake for authority. That was what made them dangerous. They knew drunk tourists would trust the shape of a uniform before they trusted their own instincts. They knew friends lose track of each other in big casinos. They knew staff are busy. They knew cameras are only useful if someone is already looking. They knew a white van near a rideshare lane would not seem strange until it was too late. And for a few minutes that night, they were right. The only reason Evan went home was because a valet noticed something off. A server cared enough to report it. Dispatch took it seriously, and Javi stepped in front of two men who were done pretending. I don't work casino security anymore. I still live in Las Vegas, and I still go to the Strip sometimes when family visits. I don't hate it. Most people are just there to have fun, lose some money, eat too much, and go home with a story. But every time I walk past a hotel entrance late at night, I check the curb. I check the vans. I check the guys standing around in clothes that almost look official. And if someone says they're there to help, I listen for the part they leave out. Who called you? What company are you with? Where are you taking them? Because real help can answer simple questions. The men outside our casino couldn't. That was the first thing that